Amber Ashfaq kept telling herself there had to be a simple explanation. Karen never just missed work. In 27 years at the pharmacy in San Jose, if Karen Navarra was going to be late, she called. On the afternoon of September 13th, 2018, the second day in a row Karen hadn't come in, Amber parked outside her friend's small house on Terra Noble Way. Amber and Karen had worked together for decades at Regional Medical Center. Karen was the veteran pharmacy tech who remembered everyone's birthdays and quietly trained new hires, including Amber, without ever making a show of it. She didn't call in sick, didn't disappear without warning, and didn't leave texts unanswered. If Karen's phone went to voicemail, she called back. That was why Amber had already spent the morning phoning, texting, and checking with coworkers before she finally drove over herself. By the time she pulled up to the curb, dread felt more reasonable than denial. The front door was unlocked. Karen lived alone and always clicked the deadbolt. Amber stepped into the quiet house and called her name. 2 cats slipped past her feet, but no one answered. As she moved toward the dining area, she saw the chair first, then the shape in it, and then the blood. Karen was seated at the table, slumped in the chair, her skin discolored, dried blood sprayed across the table and floor. A kitchen knife rested in her hand, positioned as though someone had placed it there. Amber backed away and dialed 911. San Jose officers arrived to a scene that didn't make sense. Karen Navarra was 67 years old, a pharmacy technician known for being quiet and dependable. She wasn't married and had no recent romantic partner. Yet she sat in her dining room with a deep slash across her neck, heavy trauma to her head, and a knife posed in her hand. Drawers in the bedroom were pulled out, closet doors were left open, and belongings were disturbed, but nothing valuable was missing. On the kitchen counter, officers saw a plate with several slices of pizza, suggesting she had been eating when the attack happened. Some of the wounds could have matched a suicide if someone only glanced at them, and clearly whoever killed her wanted it to look that way. But the position of her body, the angle of the throat wound, and the blunt force head injuries raised immediate doubts. The autopsy confirmed it. Karen had been beaten with a heavy object and then had her throat cut. The knife in her hand didn't match all of the injuries. This was a homicide staged to look like something else. Investigators could see how the scene might have fooled someone who wanted to believe it was self-inflicted. The knife in her hand suggested she had done this to herself. The open drawers hinted at a desperate search for pills or paperwork. But nothing important had been taken, and nothing about Karen's life suggested a sudden collapse into violence against herself. She had a steady job, pets she cared for, a mother she visited, and no history of self-harm. To the detectives who walked that house, it looked less like despair and more like someone's idea of what a suicide should look like. Detectives canvassed neighbors, gathered surveillance footage, and began interviewing people close to Karen. One name quickly rose to the top: her 90-year-old stepfather, Anthony Tony Aiello, who lived just blocks away with Karen's mother. When detectives knocked on his door, he welcomed them in. Tony explained that on the afternoon of September 8th, 5 days before Karen was found, he had stopped by her house with homemade pizza and biscotti. He said he stayed about 15 minutes. According to him, Karen walked him out and looked perfectly fine. Later that same day, he claimed he saw her drive by his house, waving, with someone in the passenger seat. It was a simple story, one that suggested she was alive well after he left. Detectives pulled surveillance from his neighborhood. None of it showed Karen driving by. They examined surveillance near Karen's home. That footage showed Tony's car pulling into her driveway at 3:12 p.m. and remaining there past 3:30 p.m. His story suddenly had cracks, but the timing still needed one more piece. They had that piece. It was sitting on Karen's wrist. When officers found her body, the coroner noted a Fitbit Alta HR activity tracker. Typically, it logged her steps and heart rate as she went about her day. Investigators obtained a warrant and had the company extract the detailed data behind the display graphs. The results were exact. On September 8th at 3:20 p.m., her heart rate spiked sharply. Over the next several minutes, it dropped. By 3:28 p.m., the Fitbit registered no heart activity at all. According to the device, Karen's heart stopped during the same time Tony's car sat in her driveway, directly contradicting his claim that she walked him out and then drove by his house later. With the Fitbit data in hand, detectives reevaluated the rest of the evidence. The staged suicide didn't fit a stranger. There was no forced entry, nothing stolen, and the pizza matched Tony's story. The timeline and the digital evidence pointed straight at him. On September 25, 2018, detectives served a search warrant at Tony Aiello's home. Inside, they found clothing with small spots of blood and signs that areas of the house had recently been cleaned. Tony, who used a walker and struggled with serious health issues, was arrested and charged with first-degree murder in the killing of his stepdaughter. Prosecutors argued that Karen had been alive when Tony arrived with pizza. Something happened between 3:12 and 3:28 p.m. Something violent enough to cause the heart rate spike the Fitbit recorded and then the sudden drop that marked her death. They believed Tony attacked her, staged the scene to look like a suicide and a burglary, and then lied about seeing her alive afterward. Tony pleaded not guilty. His attorneys pointed to his age, his heart problems, his limited mobility, and the lack of a clear motive. Supporters questioned whether the digital evidence could be interpreted differently. News of the arrest spread quickly through the people who had known Karen for years. At the hospital pharmacy, co-workers gathered in small groups, trying to reconcile the image of an elderly man with a walker with the ferocity of the wounds described in court. Some believed the technology, others focused on his age and frailty. In the neighborhood, there were similar divides. What everyone agreed on was that the Fitbit data had become the centerpiece of the case, a line of numbers narrowing the time of death to minutes and placing a familiar figure in her driveway when her heart stopped. Before any of those arguments could reach a jury, the case took one last turn. In September 2019, while still awaiting trial, Tony Aiello died in custody after a rapid decline in health. With the defendant gone, the district attorney followed procedure and dismissed the case. There was never a trial, never a verdict, and never an official ruling about exactly what happened inside Karen Navarra's home that afternoon. But the undisputed facts remained. Karen was a dedicated pharmacy technician who lived alone in a quiet San Jose neighborhood. On September 8th, she shared pizza with someone she trusted enough to let inside. Minutes later, she suffered the attack that ended her life. Her friend Amber found her 5 days later, refusing to ignore her unexplained absence. And on her wrist, a fitness tracker silently recorded the moment her heart raced, then stopped, a digital witness that contradicted the alibi of the only person ever charged with her murder, even though the full truth never reached a courtroom. Thank you for listening to The Lantern's Tale. Subscribe for more true stories, if you dare.